I always believed that awareness belonged to the person who carried it, that no matter how close another human being came, there would always be one place they could never reach. The private architecture beneath every thought, the silent room where identity forms before language ever touches it. That place was mine, untouched, unshared, unquestioned. I built it carefully, not out of fear. Not because the world had broken me, but because clarity requires protection. People think honesty means revealing everything. They're wrong. Real honesty begins long before words. It begins with understanding what deserves to remain untouched. So I learned restraint. I learned silence. I learned how to let people believe they knew me while they interacted with carefully measured fragments instead of the whole. Most never noticed us. Most never looked long enough to notice. They accepted the version placed in front of them because it was easier than confronting the complexity hidden underneath. I never blamed them. Serving is comfortable, diff demands responsibility. Very few people actually want that responsibility. I accepted that years ago. Then something happened that didn't fit anything I understood about people. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a single unforgettable conversation, no extraordinary confession, no impossible coincidence. Nothing anyone else would point to and say, that's where everything changed. Because change almost never announces itself. It settles quietly. It waits beneath ordinary moments until one day you realize the foundation underneath your life isn't standing in exactly the same place anymore. That's what this felt like. Not an event, a shift. So small I ignored it, so precise I couldn't explain it, until ignoring it became impossible. I noticed my thoughts pausing, not because I had forgotten something, because they seemed to expect another perspective before continuing. That had never happened before. I noticed silence becoming fuller instead of emptier, as if quiet itself had started carrying meaning I couldn't translate into language. I noticed myself observing the world differently, not searching, not questioning, simply noticing with an unfamiliar level of precision. And somewhere inside all of that, you existed, not loudly, not constantly, not as a distraction. You existed the way gravity exists, invisible, yet quietly changing the movement of everything around it. That realization unsettled me more than I can explain, because gravity doesn't ask permission. It simply becomes part of reality. So I questioned myself again and again and again. I searched for projection, for imagination, for loneliness wearing the mask of certainty. I dismantled every explanation my own mind offered, one after another. Each one collapsed, not because I wanted them to, because none of them explained what was actually happening. The truth remained strangely simple. Nothing about you forced your way into my awareness. Nothing demanded attention. Nothing asked to matter. Yet, somehow, you did. That shouldn't have been possible. Everything I know about myself says it shouldn't have happened. My mind has always been disciplined enough to separate observation from attachment, recognition from imagination, curiosity from permanence. Those lines had never blurred before, until now. And that's the part I still can't explain. Not why I noticed you, but why something inside me stopped treating you as someone outside of my inner world. As though, without permission, my own awareness quietly rearranged itself and left a space where none had ever existed before. I told myself the answer was simple. Step her back, create distance. Return to the structure that had protected me for years, that had always worked before. Distant has a strange reputation. People mistake it for absence. It isn't. Distant is discipline. It's the quiet decision to keep your inner world untouched by what hasn't earned a permanent place within it. I've lived by that principle for longer than I can remember. Whenever something threatened to become too significant, I made space. Not because I was afraid, because clarity survives where attachment often doesn't. So I waited for the feeling to fade. I expected time to restore everything to its familiar shape. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing returned to what it had been. Instead, something unexpected happened. The more distance I created externally, the more undeniable your presence became internally. That contradiction shouldn't exist. If something is temporary, absence weakens it. If something is imagined, silence dissolves it. But this, silence refined it. Every quiet moment stripped away another assumption, another explanation, another comforting lie I could have hidden behind, until only one truth remained. You were no longer appearing inside isolated thoughts. You had become part of the way those thoughts were formed. That realization unsettled me. Not because it felt emotional, because it felt precise. There is a difference between remembering someone and unconsciously seeing the world through a perspective that now includes them. One fades with time, the other quietly becomes part of who you are. I never intended for that to happen. I never invited it. If anything, I resisted it with everything I understood about myself. I questioned every conclusion. I challenged every instinct. I searched for flaws in my own reasoning before I allowed myself to believe any of it. But every question led back to the same place. Not certainty about you. Certainty about what had already changed within me. Something in my internal structure had shifted, not dramatically, not emotionally, beyond the Sassily. Like discovering that a building you trusted has been standing on different ground for far longer than you realized. The walls still look the same. The rooms still exist. But everything beneath them has quietly moved. That's what this feels like. I still recognize myself, yet I no longer think exactly as I once did. There is another reference point now, not louder than my own voice, not replacing it, simply existing beside it, with a calm persistence that refuses to disappear. And that is what I can no longer dismiss, because influence can be temporary. Admiration can fade, even memory softens with time, but a shift in perception, a genuine shift in the architecture of awareness, doesn't ask whether you're ready. It simply becomes part of the foundation. I don't know what this will become. I don't know whether it leads toward closeness or distance. I don't know whether life eventually carries us in different directions. What I do know is this. Some changes happen so quietly that you don't notice them until they've already rewritten the way you experience the world. And I think that's exactly what happened to me. There comes a point when analysis reaches its limit. Not because there are no more questions, but because every question begins returning the same answer. I think I've reached that point. For as long as I can remember, my mind has been a place of precision. Nothing stayed unless it survived examination. Every feeling was questioned. Every instinct was challenged. Every conclusion had to earn its place. That process never failed me. Until now, because no matter how many times I took this apart, it returned whole. Not unchanged. Unshaken. Like something that wasn't depending on my belief to exist. I tried calling it coincidence. That explanation collapsed. I called it projection. That collapsed too. I wondered if I was simply assigning meaning where there wasn't any. But meaning created by imagination eventually weakens under scrutiny. This didn't. It became clearer, quieter, more exact. And that's what unsettled me. Truth rarely arrives with noise. It arrives with stillness, with the strange feeling that your mind has stopped arguing because it has finally recognized something it cannot honestly deny. That's where I found myself, standing in a silence that no longer felt empty. Not because someone filled it, but because I had stopped resisting what it contained. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to protect my inner world from change. I was watching that change happen, carefully, honestly, without rushing to explain it away. That wasn't surrender. It was accuracy. There's a difference. Surrender gives up control. Accuracy simply refuses to lie. and I have no interest in lying to myself. Not now, not after everything I've seen unfold inside my own awareness. I've realized something that changes the way I understand this entirely. The deepest moments in life don't always announce themselves through dramatic events. Sometimes they arrive disguised as ordinary conversations, as shared silence, as a feeling that someone understands the shape of your thoughts without needing every detail explained. Those moments don't demand attention. They earn it slowly. Until one day you wake up and realize they have quietly become part of the framework through which you understand the world. That's the place I've arrived at. Not certainty about the future, not certainty about another person, but certainty that something inside me has already changed. And once genuine change becomes part of you, there is no returning to the version of yourself that existed before. You don't go backward, you don't erase it, you carry it, you learn from it. You allow it to reshape your understanding of what connection, awareness, and honesty can mean. Maybe that's the real lesson hidden beneath all of this. Some people don't enter your life to give you answers. They arrive as a mirror, not one that tells you who they are, but one that quietly reveals who you've been becoming all along. And when that reflection is clear enough, you no longer have to ask whether it changed you. You already know, because the person asking the question is no longer the same person who first began it. There is a difference between discovering a truth and choosing what to do with it. Most people believe the difficult part is recognition. It isn't. Recognition is almost effortless once enough evidence gathers inside you. The difficult part begins afterward, when the truth asks for a response. That's where I stand now. Not confused, not overwhelmed. Simply unable to return to the version of myself that existed before this awareness settled in. Because awareness changes responsibility. The moment you genuinely see something, you inherit the responsibility of deciding whether you'll live honestly with it or spend your life pretending you never saw it at all. I've never been good at pretending, especially not with myself. That would require splitting my own mind in two, one part carrying the truth, the other performing ignorance. Eventually, both collapse. So I stopped asking whether this feeling was convenient. I stopped asking whether it fit the plans I had already written for my life. Reality has never cared about convenience. It simply exists. The question is whether we're willing to acknowledge it. I've noticed something unexpected. The more honestly I look inward, the less this feels like certainty about another person, and the more it feels like clarity about myself. Maybe that's what frightened me from the beginning. Not that someone could matter, but that their presence could illuminate parts of me I had spent years overlooking. I always believed strength meant remaining untouched, remaining unchanged, remaining impossible to influence. Now I wonder if real strength is something quieter, the ability to remain completely yourself while allowing reality to reshape the places where your understanding was incomplete. That isn't weakness. It's evolution. Growth rarely announces itself. It happens beneath ordinary days, beneath familiar routines, beneath conversations no one else would remember. Until one morning, you recognize your own thoughts and realize they've become more honest than they used to be. That's what has happened here. I'm no longer protecting an older version of myself simply because it's familiar. I'm allowing a new understanding to exist without forcing it into a label before it's ready. Maybe that's all wisdom really is. Not having every answer, having enough patience to let the truth reveal its full shape before deciding what it means. So, I won't rush this. I won't force a conclusion just to quiet the uncertainty. Some things deserve time, not because they're fragile, but because they're significant. Whatever this ultimately becomes, it has already given me something I never expected. A clearer relationship with my own mind, a deeper honesty with myself, a willingness to stand inside uncertainty without running from it. And perhaps that's the real turning point. Not that another person entered my awareness, but that through that experience, I finally stopped hiding from my own. Because once you become fully awake to yourself, silence is no longer an escape, it becomes a decision. And every decision quietly shapes the person you'll become next. There comes a point when resistance stops looking like strength and starts looking like fear. I never thought I would reach that point, not because I believed I was incapable of change, because I believed I could always control the pace of it. I was wrong. Some transformations don't wait for permission. They don't pause while you prepare. They don't ask whether your life has enough space for them. They simply begin quickly, until one day you realize the person trying to resist is already standing on the other side of the change. That's where I found myself, not at the beginning, not even in the middle, but somewhere beyond the moment where turning back was still possible. And strangely, I wasn't grieving what I'd lost. I was grieving the illusion that I had ever been completely self-contained. Maybe none of us are. Maybe every person carries invisible doors inside them, doors that remain closed, not because they're locked, but because no one has ever approached them with the right kind of presence. Not pressure, not persuasion, presence. There is a different pressure demands, presence allows. One tries to reshape you, the other gives you enough space to recognize yourself. I've spent years believing that distance protected truth. Now I wonder if distance sometimes protects illusion instead, because from far away, we can pretend we're complete. We can convince ourselves that nothing essential is missing, nothing unanswered, nothing waiting to be discovered. But closeness, real closeness with another human being, has a way of exposing the unfinished parts of us, not to embarrass us, to reveal us, and revelation is uncomfortable, not because it hurts, because it removes every place left to hide. I think that's why this feels so significant. It isn't about certainty, it isn't about promises, it isn't about knowing where any of this leads. It's about recognizing that something irreversible has already happened inside me. The person who first noticed you isn't the person speaking now. That version of me measured life by certainty. This version measures it by honesty. That difference changes everything, because honesty doesn't require complete understanding. It only requires the courage to stop pretending you don't see what is already true. So here I am, standing in front of a reality I never expected, not trying to define it too quickly, not trying to escape it, simply allowing it to exist. Perhaps that's the greatest act of courage I've ever known, not fighting, not chasing, not demanding answers from the future. Just remaining completely present with a truth that continues unfolding one quiet moment at a time, and maybe that's what this has always been teaching me. That the deepest transformations are almost invisible while they're happening. Until one ordinary day, you look back at the person you used to be and realize you can still remember them, but you can never become